The moment the Alpha King's boot connected with her ribs, the entire hall went silent. What followed would become whispered legend across the eastern packs. How a nameless maid didn't cry out, didn't beg. How she instead rolled to her feet in a combat stance, muscle memory betraying 8 years of careful disguise in 3 seconds. How the most feared king in the realm froze mid-strike, recognition and desire dawning across his face. This was the moment he realized the woman he'd been hunting had been within arm's reach all along, sharpening her own blade in the dark. What neither of them knew was that this kick that exposed her would also bind their fates together. That the line between enemy and obsession is thinner than a blade's edge, and that sometimes the person you swore to kill becomes the only one who can save you. This is the story of what happened next. Violet kept her head down as she scrubbed wine stains from the throne room floor. 8 years of practice had made her invisible, biting her tongue, hunching her shoulders, playing the clumsy maid who apologized for her blunders. She burned breakfast on occasion, dropped platters at carefully calculated intervals, made herself so thoroughly mediocre that no one looked twice at her. Not a single soul suspected that the same hands scrubbing marble had once wielded blades, that her father had been one of the most decorated generals in the realm before everything went to hell, that she'd survived the night Alpha King Max Ashenheart ordered her entire family executed by crawling through ash and smoke while her world burned. She'd been 13, small enough to slip through the servant passages, smart enough to disappear. Now 21, Violet had mapped every inch of this palace, every guard rotation, every exit. She knew which floorboards creaked, which doors stuck, which windows led to freedom. She'd spent 8 years preparing. She just needed one clear shot, a single moment to take vengeance. "You there!" The voice froze her blood. Violet looked up slowly. Alpha King Max Ashenheart stood 5 feet away, and this close he was worse than she'd imagined. Tall and brutal and sharp-edged, with black hair falling across eyes the color of winter storms. At 27, he'd already earned his reputation. They said that he trusted no one, that he could sense deception, like wolves sense fear. "Your Majesty." She kept her voice small, her posture meek. The performance was now effortless after years of practice. "You missed a spot." He gestured near his boots with cold contempt. Her pulse kicked up as she shuffled forward on her knees. She'd been avoiding him by working nights, staying invisible. Being this close now felt like standing next to a fire. She reached for her brush, hyper-aware of how he loomed over her. The other servants had scattered when he entered, leaving her alone with the one person in the world who wanted her bloodline extinct. "Pathetic," he muttered. Then his boot slammed into her ribs. "Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video." Her world went sideways. Pain exploded through her chest as she flew across the polished floor. Distantly, she heard gasps from guards at the doorway, felt marble crack against her shoulder. Any normal person would have stayed down, bones shattered, organs ruptured. But Violet's body had been trained too well, for too long, to simply break. She twisted midair on pure instinct, absorbed the impact through her shoulder, rolled once, twice, and came up in a crouch before her mind could scream at her to stop. Weight balanced on the balls of her feet. Hands positioned for combat, every muscle coiled tight. The exact stance her father had drilled into her bones. The throne room went silent. Horror crashed over her as she realized what she'd done. Her years of carefully constructed invisibility, obliterated in 3 seconds of muscle memory. She forced herself to crumble, threw herself down with a theatrical sob that tasted like poison. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I don't know what. Please, I didn't mean—" "Look at me." His voice was quiet, deadly. Violet's every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. She lifted her head, meeting his gaze for the first time. Something shifted in his expression. His eyes narrowed, raking over her face. She watched him see past the dirt, hunched shoulders and servant's rags, watched recognition bloom across his features. "Bloodridge style," he said softly. "That's a very specific way to move." He took one step toward her, then another. There aren't many people alive who fight like that anymore. In fact, I made sure of it. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The Ashwin family had a daughter. His voice was almost contemplative now, like he was working through a problem. 13 years old when her house burned, except they never found her body. He crouched down until they were eye level. "Want to tell me your name again?" The air between them felt charged, dangerous. This close, she could see the scars on his knuckles, the way his jaw tightened, the intelligence burning behind those cold eyes. "Rue," she whispered. The lie came automatically. "Try again." The arrogance in his voice made her reckless, made 8 years of buried rage claw its way up her throat. "My name is Violet Ashwin, and you murdered my family." She expected fury, violence, the killing blow she'd been preparing for. Instead, Max went very still. Something flickered across his face too fast to name, there and gone like lightning. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "Guards, take her to the North Tower. Maximum security. No one sees her. No one touches her." Iron shackles materialized as 4 guards hauled her upright. Violet considered fighting, going down in a blaze of glory, but she'd already waited 8 years. She could wait a little longer to carry out her plan. As they dragged her toward the door, she looked back once, found him still watching her with an expression she couldn't read that made her skin prickle. "You should have made sure I was dead," she said. His jaw tightened. "Trust me, I'm starting to realize that." But there was something in his eyes that wasn't quite hatred, something that made her pulse spike for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. The guards pulled her away, and Violet told herself the flutter in her chest was adrenaline. Survival instinct. Anything except the dangerous awareness that maybe Max wasn't the simple monster she'd built him into. That was going to be a problem. The cell was smaller than Violet expected. Stone walls, one narrow window, iron shackles bolted to the floor. She tested the chains immediately. Solid. Well made. No obvious weaknesses. Hours passed. The light through the window shifted from afternoon to dusk to darkness. Violet used the time to think, to plan. She'd survived worse than a cell. Her father had taught her that imprisonment was just another kind of battlefield. You assessed your resources, found the weakness, waited for your opening. The door opened near midnight. Max Ashenheart stood in the doorway, and without his crown, his formal armor, he looked younger, more human. He carried a tray of food in one hand and a lantern in the other. "The guards said you haven't eaten," he said. Violet stared at him. "I'm not hungry." "You will be." Their fingers brushed as he set down the tray, and Violet jerked back like she'd been burned. Max's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, settling against the opposite wall with deliberate distance between them, watching her with those storm-colored eyes. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 8 years of history. "Why am I still alive?" she finally asked. "I'm trying to decide." His voice was quieter than it had been in the throne room, thoughtful. "It seems you've been in my palace for 8 years. You could have killed me 100 times. I was waiting for the right moment." "No." He shook his head slowly. "You were waiting for something else. Otherwise, you would have tried by now, even if it meant dying in the attempt. He leaned forward slightly. So, what were you really waiting for, Violet Ashwin? The way her name unfurled on his tongue made something in her chest tighten, like he'd been waiting to say it for years. Answers, she admitted before she could stop herself. I want to know why. My father served your family for 20 years. He was loyal, he was good, and you burned him alive. Something dark crossed Max's face. Is that what you think happened? I know what happened. I was there. Then you know less than you think. He stood abruptly, and Violet tensed, but he just moved to the window, staring out at the darkness. Your father died because he found something he shouldn't have, something that would have destroyed the realm if it came to light. But I'm not your enemy here. Violet's breath caught. I don't believe you. He turned back to her, and in the lantern light, his expression was unreadable. Ask yourself why a decorated general would suddenly turn traitor, why he'd risk everything he'd built, why he'd put his own daughter in danger. He paused. Unless he wasn't the traitor at all. The words hung between them like smoke. If you're trying to manipulate me. I'm trying to tell you the truth, which is more than anyone else has done for you clearly. He moved closer, crouching down until they were eye level again. You want answers? I'll give them to you, but you're not going to like what you find. This close, Violet could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way he looked at her like she was the most enchanting puzzle. Why? She whispered. For a long moment, he didn't answer, just studied her face like he was memorizing it. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I often dream about that night and wake up wondering what would have happened if I'd found you first, if I'd gotten to you before. He stopped, took a breath. You're not supposed to exist, Violet. You were supposed to die with your family. The fact that you're alive means everything I thought I knew might be wrong. The air between them felt electric, charged with something neither of them wanted to name. I need my revenge. An eye for an eye, Violet said, but her voice lacked her usual conviction. Max's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I know. That's part of the problem. He stood, headed for the door, then paused. Get some rest. Tomorrow, I'm going to show you something, and after you see it, you can decide who the real enemy is. Then he was gone, leaving Violet alone with the food, the darkness, and the unsettling realization that she'd expected to hate him more than this. That was definitely going to be a problem. Dawn came too soon. Violet hadn't slept. She'd spent the night replaying Max's words, searching for the manipulation, the trap. I'm not your enemy. It had to be a lie. She'd built her entire existence around the certainty of Max's guilt, around the rightness of her hatred. If that was gone, what did she have left? The door opened. Max entered alone this time, no guards, which was either incredibly stupid or a show of trust she didn't understand. He carried a ring of keys that he used to unlock her shackles. If you run, my guards will kill you before you reach the courtyard, he said matter-of-factly. If you attack me, you'll die wondering if I was telling the truth. He stepped back, giving her space. It's your choice. Violet rubbed her wrists, eyeing the distance between them. She could probably land 2 good hits before he countered. He gestured to the door. After you. She walked past him, hyper-aware of how close he stood, how easy it would be for him to grab her. But he didn't. Just followed at a respectful distance as she navigated the corridor under his quiet directions. They descended deeper into the palace than she'd ever been, past the dungeons, past the wine cellars, into passages that looked older than the current structure. The air grew colder, damper. The walls changed from hewn stone to something rougher, more ancient. Finally, Max stopped before an iron door covered in dust. He produced a different key, older and more ornate than the others. "My father showed me this room 3 days before he died," Max said quietly. "Told me it contained the truth about our bloodline, about the real threats to the throne." He turned the key. I was 19. Foolish. I believed everything my advisor told me instead of what was right here. The door swung open to reveal a small chamber. Shelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound journals, scrolls, correspondence sealed with various noble houses' crests. A desk sat in the center, and on it lay a single journal, newer than the others, with a name embossed on the cover. General Matthias Ashwin. Violet's breath stopped. "I found it 6 months ago," Max said. "I'd been going through the archives, trying to understand why 3 of my generals had died under suspicious circumstances. Similar to how..." He stopped. "Similar to what happened to your father." Violet moved toward the desk as if pulled by invisible strings. Her hands trembled as she touched the journal's cover. Her father's private journal was here. All this time. "The last entry is dated the day he died," Max said softly. "Read it." She opened to the final pages, her father's familiar handwriting blurring through sudden tears. "If you're reading this, I'm already dead. And if you're Violet, my brave, brilliant girl, then you survived. Good. That means Casper hasn't found you yet. I don't have much time. Casper Varoche, the king's advisor, has been poisoning the Ashenheart bloodline for years. Small doses, building up in their systems. The old king's sudden illness was murder. Young Max will be next, once Casper secures enough support among the nobles. I found the evidence. I was going to expose him tomorrow. But Casper learned I knew. He's framed me for treason, convinced Max I'm planning a coup. The boy is grieving, vulnerable, trusting the man who's been like a father to him since his real father died. He'll believe every word Casper says. I could run, but if I do, Casper will know I have evidence. He'll tear the realm apart looking for it, and he'll find you, Violet. He knows about you, about your training. He'll use you to ensure my silence. So I'm going to die a traitor. I'm going to let Max execute me, and I'm going to make sure you're nowhere near when it happens. Better you have a dead father than become Casper's target. If you're reading this, it means Max finally questioned what happened. It means there's hope. Trust him, Violet. He's not the enemy. He never was. We were both Casper's weapons, and the only way to survive now is together. I love you. I'm sorry. And I'm proud of the woman you'll become. The journal slipped from Violet's hands. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the roaring in her ears. "There's more," Max said, his voice rough. "Evidence of the poisoning. Letters between Casper and 3 nobles who've since died mysteriously. A list of others he's compromised." He moved beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Your father saved my life, Violet. I just didn't know it until 6 months ago." She turned to face him, this man she'd sworn to kill, and saw grief in his eyes that matched her own. "Casper was like a father to me after my father died," Max said quietly. "He taught me how to rule, how to be strong, how to trust no one." His jaw clenched. "He shaped me into someone who would execute a loyal general without question, someone who would burn a house full of people because I was too broken to see the truth." "He wanted you isolated," Violet whispered, the pieces falling into place. No one you could trust. No one who could tell you the truth. And he wanted you dead, because if you survived, if you ever found this evidence, Max gestured to the room, you'd be proof there were cracks in his control. Violet's mind raced. Where is he now? Casper? Still my senior advisor, still whispering in my ear, still waiting for the right moment to finish what he started. Max's expression hardened. I've been playing along for 6 months, pretending I don't know, trying to gather enough evidence to move against him without triggering a civil war. He has too many allies, too much power. But I'm exposed now, aren't I? Violet said. Your guards saw me move. Heard my confession. Yes, he knows I have you, which means he'll accelerate his timeline. Max's eyes locked onto hers. We're running out of time, Violet. Both of us. The weight of it crashed over her, her father, innocent. Max, manipulated, and now they were both in danger because she'd blown her cover. I should have stayed hidden, she said bitterly. No. Max's hand caught her chin, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. The touch sent electricity through her skin. If you'd stayed hidden, I never would have known for certain you were alive. I never would have had an ally who knows how to fight like your father taught you, who has every reason to want Casper dead. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, surprisingly gentle. You've been surviving alone for 8 years. You don't have to anymore. The moment stretched between them, charged and dangerous. Violet's pulse raced, and she couldn't tell if it was from his proximity or the realization that everything had changed. I barely know you, she said, but it came out breathless. Then let's fix that. His hand dropped, and she felt the loss of his touch like a physical ache. Starting with getting you out of that cell and into quarters where you can actually help me plan. Max's mouth curved into something that was almost a smile, but there was no humor in it. You could still try to kill me. Maybe you'd even succeed. He headed for the door, then stopped, his hand on the frame. But I don't think you want me dead anymore, Violet. I think you want the same thing I do. The truth. Justice for your father. For all of them. He was right. Violet had spent so long hating him. It was clean, simple. Her hatred was the fuel that kept her warm on cold nights, given her purpose when she had nothing else. But now, watching him stand in that doorway looking lost and determined and heartbreakingly human, she realized the hatred was slipping away, and she didn't yet know what would fill the space it left behind. That terrified her more than anything. What's the plan? She asked. Max's smile turned sharp and dangerous. We make Casper think you're still my prisoner, that I'm keeping you alive to torture information out of you. Meanwhile, you help me identify everyone in his network. He glanced back at her. And we prepare for when he tries to kill us both. Violet found herself smiling back. When do we start? The quarters Max led her to were in the private wing of the palace, nowhere near the servants' area or the guest rooms. They were his rooms, she realized with a jolt. A sitting room connected to a bedroom, both decorated in dark wood and deep blues. I'm not keeping you in my bedroom, Max said, catching her expression. There's a guest room through that door, but Casper has spies everywhere. If you're in the tower, he'll wonder why I haven't killed you yet. If you're here? He shrugged. He'll assume I'm keeping you close for my own purposes. Your own purposes, Violet repeated flatly. Torture, information extraction, take your pick. Max moved to a cabinet and pulled out a map, spreading it on the desk. Whatever keeps them from looking too closely. It made sense tactically. It also meant spending time in close quarters with the man who'd ordered her family's execution. The man who apparently had been just as much a victim as she was. The man whose touch still lingered on her skin like a brand. "Fine," she said, "but I want weapons, and I want to see all the evidence you have on Casper." "Done." Max gestured to a chest against the wall. "My personal armory. Take whatever you need. As for evidence," he tapped the map. "Red marks are nobles in Casper's pocket. Blue are unknowns. Green are ones I trust. Barely. In the past 6 months, 2 greens have turned red, and 1 blue ended up dead." Violet studied the map. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Casper was systematically isolating Max, turning his allies or eliminating them. He's building towards something, a coup? Possibly. Or he's just ensuring that when I finally die of mysterious illness, there's no one left to question it. The casual way Max talked about his own death made something twist in Violet's chest. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on the tactical problem. We need to flip one of his people. Someone close enough to know his plans, but not so loyal they'll run straight to him. "Already working on it." Max pointed to a blue mark on the eastern border. "Lord Brennan. His daughter was engaged to one of Casper's men until she died in a riding accident 2 months ago. Brennan's been asking questions." "You think it wasn't an accident?" "I think Casper doesn't leave loose ends." Max's jaw tightened. "And I believe Brennan suspects the same thing." They worked through the afternoon, comparing notes, identifying patterns. It was easier than Violet expected, falling into rhythm with him. He was sharp, tactical, willing to listen to her observations. More than once, she caught herself forgetting who he was, treating him like a partner instead of an enemy. The sun was setting when Max finally straightened, rolling his shoulders. "We should eat. And I need to make an appearance at dinner. Let Casper see that I'm acting normally." "What about me?" "You stay here, out of sight. If anyone asks, you're still in the tower." He moved toward the door, then hesitated. "Violet, what your father wrote in that journal about trusting me. Do you?" The question hung in the air between them. Violet thought about lying or deflecting, but they were past that now. "I'm trying," she managed honestly. "It's harder than I thought. Unlearning 8 years of hatred." Something flashed across Max's lips. Not quite a smile, but close. "For what it's worth, I'm trying too. Unlearning the idea that everyone's an enemy." After he left, Violet explored the guest room. It was comfortable, well-appointed, nothing like the cell she'd expected to die in. She found clothing in the wardrobe that would fit her, clearly placed there recently. Max had been planning this, she realized. Had been preparing for the possibility that she existed, that she might be found. The thought should have unsettled her. Instead, it made her feel something else. Something dangerous that felt like the first edges of trust. She pushed it aside and focused on weapons. The armory chest held an impressive array. She selected 2 daggers, lightweight and perfectly balanced, and a short sword that felt right in her hand. Her father had taught her on weapons like these. The grief hit her suddenly, sharp and overwhelming. Her father had walked to his death willingly, all to keep her safe. Violet sank onto the bed, the sword still clutched in her hand, and let herself cry for the first time since she came to the palace. Max returned near midnight to find her sitting by the window, weapons laid out on the table before her, eyes red but dry. "Casper asked about you," he said without preamble. "Wanted to know why you're still alive." "What did you tell him?" "That I'm determining if you have any useful information, that you're broken but not talking yet." Max poured 2 glasses of wine, offered her one. "He suggested I execute you publicly, Make an example. Violet's hand tightened on her dagger hilt. I told him I'd consider it, Max continued, after I've extracted everything valuable. He took a drink. He seemed satisfied with that. How long before he stops being satisfied? A week, maybe 2. Max settled into the chair across from her. We need to move faster than I'd like. Lord Brennan arrives in 3 days. If we can turn him, we'll have someone inside Casper's network. And if we can't? Then we're fighting blind against an enemy who's had years to prepare. Max met her eyes over the rim of his glass. Your father wrote that some truths burn everything to ash. I'm starting to think he was right. They sat in silence, the weight of impossible odds settling between them. Violet studied Max in the candlelight, trying to reconcile the brutal king with the man who'd kept her father's journal, who'd spent 6 months carefully gathering evidence, who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for years. Why did you really keep me alive? She asked. You could have killed me in that throne room, ended the risk. Max was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. You've been a ghost I couldn't stop thinking about. The one person who slipped through my fingers. Proof that I'd failed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and the vulnerability in his expression made her breath catch. I dreamed about you, Violet. About finding you. About what I'd say if I ever got the chance. He looked up, and the intensity in his storm-gray eyes pinned her in place. When I saw you move in that throne room, I realized you weren't a ghost after all. You were real, magnificent. The air between them felt too thin, too charged. You don't really know me, Max. I know you survived 8 years in enemy territory. I know you're smart enough to stay hidden and patient enough to wait for the right moment. His eyes locked onto hers. And I know that when I kicked you across that throne room, you rolled with the impact perfectly. Your ribs should have shattered, but you came up ready to kill me. Violet's breath caught. You were testing me. What gave it away? Her pulse quickened, searching for her mistake. Max was quiet for a moment. Your hands. The first time I saw you scrubbing floors, weeks ago. You were in the East Corridor, and I walked past without really looking. But something that day made me glance back. Your hands moved too precisely, too efficiently, like someone who'd been trained to conserve energy, to stay ready for combat at a moment's notice. I told myself I was imagining it. That grief was making me see ghosts everywhere, but I started watching you after that. The way you held yourself when you thought no one was looking. How your eyes tracked movements like a fighter, not a servant. His jaw tightened. You were too perfect at being invisible. And the only people who are that good at hiding are people who've had to survive. So, that's when you kicked me. I tested you. He corrected softly. His storm-gray eyes held hers, and for a moment Violet forgot how to breathe. She could feel herself falling into his gaze, into the raw honesty there. When you moved, Max continued, his voice dropping lower, when I saw you position your body exactly the way your father did. He stopped, and something vulnerable flickered across his face. I knew. For the first time in 8 years, I had hoped that maybe I could fix what I'd broken. The words settled between them, heavy with meaning. Violet forced herself to focus, to remember why they were here. So, what now? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Now we train together, fight together. Figure out if we can actually trust each other before Casper forces our hand. Max stood, offered her his hand. Starting tomorrow. Get some sleep, Violet. You're going to need it. She stared at his outstretched hand, at the scars on his knuckles, at the strength in his fingers. Taking it felt like stepping off a cliff into darkness. His grip was warm, firm, steadying. For just a moment, neither of them moved. Then Max pulled her to her feet, released her hand, and stepped back. Tomorrow, we start hunting Casper back. With that, he was gone. Violet lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. Everything had changed in less than a day. Her enemy had become her ally. Her hatred had become something more complicated. And somewhere in this palace, Casper was planning their deaths, unaware that his perfect control was beginning to slip. Training with Max was nothing like Violet expected. She'd assumed he'd be competent, perhaps even skilled. Kings didn't survive long without knowing how to fight, but watching him move through the private training yard behind his quarters, she realized he was absolutely devastating. "Bloodridge style," Max said, settling into a fighting stance. "Your father trained with Master Wen for 5 years before he perfected it. I want to see what he taught you." Violet circled him warily. They'd both stripped down to training clothes, and she was acutely aware of the muscle definition across his shoulders, the controlled grace in his movements. "What if I don't feel like showing you?" "Then you're less serious about killing Casper than I thought." He lunged. Violet moved on instinct, deflecting his strike and countering with a sweep at his legs. He evaded, barely, and came at her again. They traded blows, testing each other's defenses, neither fully committing. "You're holding back," Max said, blocking her kick. "So are you." His eyes gleamed. "Then let's give it our all." The fight that followed was brutal and honest. Max fought like someone who'd earned every scar on his body. They were evenly matched in ways that shouldn't have been possible. He scored a hit on her shoulder. She got him in the ribs. He nearly swept her legs. She almost disarmed him. They broke apart, breathing hard, grinning despite themselves. Violet became acutely aware of how close they were still standing, of the rise and fall of his chest, of the way his eyes had darkened as they traced over her face. "Your father taught you well," Max said. "Your father taught me too." At her shocked expression, Max's smile turned sad. "For 3 years before he died, he trained me personally, said I needed to understand Bloodridge style to counter threats. I thought he was preparing me to fight external enemies." He wiped sweat from his brow. "Turns out, he was teaching me to survive what was coming." The revelation settled over Violet like a weight. Her father had trained them both, had prepared them both for this moment, even if neither of them had understood it at the time. "He knew," she said quietly. "He knew we'd end up here, fighting together." Or he hoped. Max moved closer now, and Violet's breath caught at his proximity. "He wrote that journal entry for both of us, Violet. He wanted us to find each other." The air between them felt charged again, heavy with things neither of them wanted to name. Max's hand came up, hesitated, then brushed a strand of sweat-dampened hair from her face. "Again?" he asked, his voice rough. Violet nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They fought until the sun climbed high, until they were both exhausted and covered in bruises, and somewhere in the midst of it, the last of Violet's carefully constructed hatred began to crack. Lord Brennan arrived on the 3rd day, a weathered man with grief etched into every line of his face. Violet watched from behind a screen in Max's study as they met. This was the moment that would determine everything. If Brennan could be turned, they had a chance. If not, Casper would know they were moving against him. "My lord," Max said, all formal politeness. "Thank you for making the journey." "Your Majesty." Brennan bowed stiffly. Though I confess, I'm uncertain why you summoned me. Max gestured to a chair, and they settled into careful political dance. Violet tuned out the pleasantries, watching Brennan's body language instead. The tension in his shoulders, the way his hand kept drifting to where a sword would hang. This was a man ready for violence. Finally, Max leaned forward. Your daughter, Elena. I'm sorry for your loss. Brennan's expression shuddered. Riding accidents happen. Do they? To expert riders on familiar trails in perfect weather? The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. What are you implying, Your Majesty? Brennan's voice was dangerously quiet. I'm implying that we've both lost people we love to the same man. Max pulled out a file, slid it across the desk. Lord Casper's personal correspondence. Note the dates. Brennan opened the file with shaking hands. Violet watched recognition dawn across his face, followed by rage so pure it was almost beautiful. He killed her, Brennan whispered, because she overheard something, because she asked the wrong questions. Yes, Max said simply, and he'll kill anyone else who threatens his plans, including both of us, if we're not careful. Why are you telling me this? I need allies I can trust. I'm tired of watching good people die. Max's voice hardened. And because Casper has been poisoning me slowly for years, the same way he poisoned my father, I'm running out of time to stop him. The truth of it hung in the air, stark and terrible. What do you need from me? Brennan asked finally. Information. Access to his network. A testimony that can't be dismissed when we move against him. Max paused. And I need you to keep meeting with him. Keep acting normal while we gather the rest of the evidence we need. You're asking me to smile at my daughter's murderer? I'm asking you to help me destroy him. Max's eyes were steel. Your daughter deserves justice. So do all the others he's killed. Brennan looked at the file again, at the proof of his daughter's murder laid out in cold, clinical detail. When he looked up, his eyes burned with the same need for vengeance that Violet recognized in her own chest. Tell me what you need, Brennan said. I'll do it. The plan came together over the next week like pieces of a blade being forged. Brennan would continue acting as a grieving father seeking comfort in Casper's counsel. Meanwhile, he'd feed Max information about Casper's network, about the nobles being compromised, about the timeline for whatever Casper was planning. Violet remained officially imprisoned, though she spent her nights poring over documents with Max, mapping connections, identifying weak points. They worked side by side in his study until dawn most nights, existing on coffee and stubborn determination. And slowly, something shifted between them. It started small. Max's hand on her shoulder when she'd been staring at her father's handwriting too long. Violet bringing him food when he forgot to eat. The way they'd developed a rhythm, anticipating each other's thoughts, finishing each other's sentences. The way she'd stopped flinching when he moved too quickly. The way he'd started smiling more, genuine expressions that transformed his severe features into something breathtaking. You're staring, Max said one night, not looking up from the ledger he was reviewing. Violet realized she had been. I'm trying to figure you out. Any luck? You're nothing like I expected. She leaned back in her chair, studying him. The stories paint you as a monster, cold, brutal, incapable of mercy. Maybe I am those things. He finally looked up, and the shadows under his eyes made him look vulnerable. I've done terrible things, Violet. Ordered executions. Made examples of people who probably didn't deserve it. Let Casper shape me into his perfect weapon. But you're trying to fix it now. Does that undo the damage? Violet thought about her father's journal, about 8 years of misdirected hatred. I think my father would say that what matters is what we do next, who we choose to be when we finally see the truth. Max's expression softened. He really was a good man, wasn't he? The best. Her throat tightened. I wish I'd had more time with him. He knew you loved him. Max interrupted gently. That journal entry. He wrote it knowing exactly who you were. Brave, brilliant, strong enough to survive anything. He paused. He'd be proud of the woman you are. The words cracked something open in Violet's chest. Before she could think better of it, she crossed the space between them, and Max rose to meet her. His arms came around her cautiously, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to offer comfort. But once he held her, something shifted. His grip tightened, one hand sliding up to cradle the back of her head, and Violet found herself melting into him in a way that terrified her. He was solid and warm and safe, something she hadn't felt in years. She breathed him in against her best judgment and felt herself breaking apart in his arms. I'm sorry, Max murmured into her hair. For all of it. For what Casper made me do. For the years you spent alone. For... Stop. Violet pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. You were 19. Manipulated by someone you trusted. I was 13, convinced you were evil. She shook her head. We were both Casper's victims. The only person who needs to apologize is him. Max's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. When this is over, we'll figure it out, she finished. Together. The word hung between them, heavy with promise. Then Max's expression shifted, sharpened. Someone's coming. They broke apart as footsteps echoed in the hallway. Max moved smoothly to the door, opened it to reveal a guard. Your Majesty, Lord Casper requests an audience. He says it's urgent. Max's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Tell him I'll be there shortly. After the guard left, he turned back to Violet. Hide. If he's coming at this hour, something's wrong. Violet slipped into the adjacent room as Casper's voice filled the study. Max, my boy. Forgive the late hour, but I have concerning news. Through the crack in the door, Violet watched Casper for the first time. He was older than she'd expected, perhaps 60, with silver hair and a grandfatherly demeanor that made her skin crawl. What news? Max asked, his voice neutral. Lord Brennan has been asking questions about his daughter's death, about certain financial irregularities. Casper's tone was concerned, paternal. I fear he may be becoming unstable in his grief, a danger to himself and others. Violet's blood ran cold. Casper already knew, or at least suspected. What do you suggest? Max asked. Perhaps invite him to the palace, where we can keep an eye on him, ensure he doesn't do anything unfortunate. Casper's smile didn't reach his eyes. For his own safety, of course. Of course, Max echoed. I'll send for him tomorrow. After Casper left, Max remained still for a long moment. Violet emerged from her hiding spot. Brennan's in danger. We all are. Max moved to his desk, pulled out a sealed letter. I've been preparing for this, a contingency if Casper forced our hand early. He handed her the letter. Tomorrow, you're going to do something incredibly stupid. What is it? His smile was sharp and dangerous. You're going to escape. The escape was meant to look desperate, violent. Violet overpowered a guard, stole weapons, and fled into the night. Max raised the alarm, sent guards after her, played the furious king perfectly. What no one else knew was that Violet was heading straight for Lord Brennan's estate, with evidence tucked into her clothing and instructions to get him to safety. She arrived near dawn, exhausted and covered in carefully placed bruises that made the escape look legitimate. Brennan met her at the door with a sword drawn. "Easy," Violet said, hands raised. "Max sent me. We don't have much time." Inside, she laid out everything. The evidence against Casper, the plan, the timeline. "He's going to kill you next," she said bluntly. "Probably make it look like grief drove you to suicide. We need to move now." Brennan stared at the documents spread across his table. "Even with all this, Casper has too much support. Half the noble houses are in his pocket. Which is why we're not going after him politically." Violet pulled out a small vial from her coat. "This is the poison he's been using on Max, on your daughter, on dozens of others. We have testimony from the apothecary who made it, secured by Max 6 months ago." She set it down carefully. "Tomorrow night, Casper is hosting a gathering. All his allies will be there. We're going to expose him in front of everyone who matters. If they don't believe us, then we fight our way out and hope we survive long enough to try again." Violet's smile was grim. "Your choice, Lord Brennan. Justice or safety. You can't have both." Brennan looked at his daughter's portrait hanging above the fireplace. "Elena would tell me I'm an idiot for even hesitating." "Probably," Violet agreed. "Then let's burn his world down." The gathering was everything Casper loved, lavish, political, full of people he controlled. Violet watched from the shadows as nobles mingled, as Casper held court like the king he'd always wanted to be. Max played his part perfectly, attentive, controlled, showing no sign that this was the night everything would change. Violet had slipped back into the palace hours earlier, using the same servant passages she'd escaped through. Now she wore the face of a serving girl, invisible again, moving through the crowd with trays of wine. No one looked at her twice. Lord Brennan arrived fashionably late. Casper greeted him warmly, the perfect picture of concerned friendship. Violet felt sick watching them embrace. Then Max stood, called for attention. "My lords and ladies, thank you for joining us tonight. I have an announcement." The room quieted. Casper's smile was indulgent, anticipatory. He thought he knew what was coming, probably expected Max to announce new appointments, new consolidations of power that Casper had carefully orchestrated. 8 years ago, Max said, his voice carrying through the hall, "I ordered the execution of General Matthias Ashwin for treason. I believed he had betrayed the crown, betrayed my father, betrayed everything we stood for." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Casper's smile tightened imperceptibly. "I was wrong," Max continued. "General Ashwin was loyal until his last breath. He died protecting this throne from a threat I was too blind to see." He gestured, and guards brought forward the apothecary, shaking but resolute. "This man will testify that he was coerced into creating a poison used to murder my father, used on me, used on dozens of loyal subjects whose only crime was asking the wrong questions." The murmurs grew louder. Casper's face remained calm, but Violet saw the calculation in his eyes. He was already planning, already positioning. "Lord Casper," Max said, his voice cutting through the noise, "would you like to explain why your private correspondence details payments to this man? Why your signature appears on orders for nightshade root in quantities that have no legitimate use?" Forgery, Casper said smoothly. Max, my boy, I understand your grief, but I found my father's private journals, Max interrupted. Hidden in a vault he showed me before he died. He suspected you, documented everything, and when General Ashwin found proof, you framed him to silence him. Lord Brennan stepped forward. You killed my daughter because she overheard you planning the king's assassination. You made it look like an accident. Other voices joined in. A lord whose brother had died mysteriously. A lady whose husband had been poisoned. One by one, Casper's victims stepped forward, and Violet watched his carefully constructed empire begin to crack. These are lies, Casper snarled, his grandfatherly mask slipping. Desperate fabrications from a weak king who has evidence, Max said coldly. He produced document after document. Letters, ledgers, testimony, years of carefully buried truth dragged into the light. Casper's eyes swept the room, calculating odds, finding allies. His hand moved toward his belt, and Violet saw the flash of steel. She moved before thinking, dropping her tray and launching herself forward. Her blade met Casper's before it could reach Max's back, the clash of metal ringing through the suddenly silent hall. Violet kept her voice deadly calm. Remember me? The daughter who was supposed to die with her father? Recognition and horror flashed across Casper's face. You? She was vaguely aware of guards surrounding them, of the crowd pressing back, but her focus was entirely on the man who'd destroyed her family. You tried to erase us. Now you get to watch everything you built crumble. Casper lunged. Violet deflected, countered, drove him back. He was skilled, she'd give him that, but he was also 60 years old and facing someone who'd spent 8 years dreaming of this moment. Max joined her, and together they moved like they'd trained for this, perfectly synchronized, her father's teachings flowing through both of them. Violet saw it in Casper's eyes, the moment calculation turned to desperation, then twisted into something darker. Rage. If I fall, he snarled, I'm taking you both with me. He lunged, not at Max now, but at the crowd, toward Lord Brennan, toward the witnesses who could testify against him. Violet moved on instinct, her father's training singing through her veins. She intercepted Casper mid-strike, their blades clashing with a sound that rang through the hall. For a heartbeat they were locked together, his face inches from hers, twisted with hate. Your father begged, Casper hissed, begged me to spare you. White-hot rage flooded through her, but beneath it, something steadier, colder. He didn't beg, Violet said, but beneath it, something steadier, colder. He didn't beg, Violet said quietly. He sacrificed himself. She twisted, using his momentum against him. Her blade traced a perfect arc, not lethal, but devastating. His sword clattered to the marble as he stumbled back, clutching his shoulder. Max was there in an instant, his blade at Casper's throat as the older man fell to his knees. It's over, Max said, his voice carrying through the silent hall. Every crime, every death, every lie. Finished. Casper looked up at them both, the king he'd tried to control and the daughter who'd survived his purge. And for the first time, Violet saw real fear in his eyes. Guards, Max commanded. Take him. As they hauled Casper to his feet, he twisted back toward them, desperation making him reckless. You think you've won? There are others. My network runs deeper than you know. You'll never be safe. Then we'll root them out, Violet interrupted coldly, one by one, however long it takes. She stepped forward until she was close enough that only Casper could hear her next words. My father taught me patience. I can wait. Can you? The fight drained out of him then. Violet watched him shrink. This man who'd killed so many, who'd orchestrated so much suffering. In the end, he was just a bitter old man who'd lost. As the guards dragged him away, Max's hand found hers and squeezed. His thumb traced small circles against her palm, a gesture so tender it made her throat tight. When she glanced up at him, his eyes were already on her, filled with something that looked dangerously like devotion. The trial lasted 3 days. Violet testified about the night her family burned. Lord Brennan spoke about his daughter. Dozens of others came forward, people who'd been too terrified to speak while Caspar held power. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict was unanimous. Execution at dawn. The night before, Violet found Max standing on his private balcony, staring out at the city. "Trouble sleeping?" she asked, joining him. "Thinking about how many people died because I trusted the wrong person." His voice was hollow. "How many could have been saved if I'd just questioned things earlier?" "You were manipulated by someone you loved." Violet took his hand, laced her fingers through his. "You can stop torturing yourself. Start focusing on what comes next." "What does come next?" Max turned to face her, and in the moonlight he looked younger, more uncertain. "Caspar shaped everything I am. Without him, I don't know." "You know exactly who you are," Violet interrupted. "You're the king who spent 6 months gathering evidence instead of seeking revenge, who kept my father's journal and believed it even though it meant admitting you'd been wrong, who gave me a choice to trust you instead of forcing it." She stepped closer, close enough to feel his warmth. "You're the man who taught me that maybe hatred isn't the only legacy I have to carry." Max's hand came up to cup her face, and this time when he looked at her, there was no hesitation. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," she agreed. "Good thing I'm not asking what you deserve." She rose on her toes, bringing their faces level. "I'm asking what you want." Max's other hand found her waist, fingers curling into the fabric of her dress like he was physically restraining himself from pulling her closer. His forehead dropped to rest against hers, and his voice came out raw. "I've wanted you from the moment I saw you stand up in that throne room. Wanted you when I shouldn't, when you still hated me, when you had every right to put a blade through my heart." She kissed him. It was tentative at first, questioning. Then Max's arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and claiming. 8 years of grief and rage and loneliness pouring into this moment. His hands tangled in her hair, hers fisted in his shirt. They broke apart only when breathing became necessary, foreheads pressed together, both shaking. "I want this," Violet whispered against his mouth. "However messy it gets." Max's grip tightened on her waist. "Even knowing what I did? What I can't undo?" She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "We're both broken, Max. Maybe that's the point. Maybe we're the only ones who can understand what that costs." He kissed her again, slower this time. When they broke apart, he whispered, "I'm not good at this, at letting people in." "Good thing I'm not asking you to be good at it." Her fingers traced the scar along his jaw. "Just don't shut me out." They stood together on the balcony as the sky began to lighten, as dawn approached and with it, justice for all the people they'd lost. Caspar Verosche died at dawn, unrepentant to the end. Violet watched from beside Max as the blade fell and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no closure. Just the quiet certainty that this particular threat was over. What now? She asked, as they walked back to the palace through the early morning light. Now we rebuild, Max said. He stopped, turned to face her fully. I need people I can trust. People who will tell me the truth even when it's difficult. People who won't let me become what Casper tried to make me. He paused. I need you, Violet, not as a prisoner, not as an obligation, as my partner, my advisor, my dash. You're what? She raised an eyebrow, teasing. His mouth curved into that almost smile she was growing addicted to. I was going to say equal, but I think we both know you're probably smarter than me. Definitely smarter, she agreed. Then, more seriously, I don't know how to be part of a court. Then we'll figure it out together. Max took her hand, and this time it felt less like sealing a deal and more like coming home. The realm needs to see you, Violet Ashwin, daughter of a hero, survivor, fighter. Around them, the palace was waking up. Servants moving through hallways, guards changing shifts, life continuing despite everything that had changed. Lord Brennan was helping them root out the remainder of Casper's network. Other nobles, freed from Casper's influence, were tentatively offering support. It would be messy. There would be setbacks. People who didn't want change. People who'd benefited from Casper's corruption. But standing there with Max's hand in hers, watching the sun rise over the palace where she'd spent 8 years invisible and alone, Violet felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Hope. Ready? Max asked, nodding toward the council chamber where they had meetings scheduled all day. Ready, Violet confirmed. They walked into the palace together, two people who'd been broken by the same man and had somehow found a way to heal each other. And somewhere, Violet thought her father was probably smiling. He'd spent his last hours ensuring they'd find each other, ensuring his daughter would have an ally when the truth finally came to light. He'd died believing they could do what he couldn't, stop Casper and save the realm. He'd been right. Thank you, Father, she thought, for everything, for training me, for protecting me, for believing we'd figure it out. Just before they reached the council chamber doors, Max pulled her to a stop. Without a word, he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so achingly reverent it made her chest tight. Together, he said quietly. Together, she echoed. They had work to do, a kingdom to heal, enemies still lurking in shadows. But for the first time in 8 years, she was no longer alone. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.